Welcome back to another video, and today we're going to bring our building system from this project right here into this project over here. Now this project has an inventory system. If you want to download this, it should be down in the description box, but yeah, it doesn't matter to which project you move this to. Simply I just have an inventory in here, so I'm going to be using this inventory, but obviously you can use any inventory, any system, and I'm going to explain what you need to do in the upcoming episodes to combine whatever inventory with the building system, because the idea is basically the same. You just simply need to use your functions, and well, it shouldn't be anything too difficult. Now what is very important is that you enable all the same plugins that you might have in the building project. All the same plugins. Now throughout this series in the building system, all we did was we used just one plugin, which is the Apex Destruction. So go ahead, enable that in your new project. It's going to ask you to restart the project. Go ahead, do that, restart it, and you're going to be back in this screen right here. So once you have done that, now go ahead, open up your buildings project, right click your buildings folder and select Migrate. Now this automatically will select all the dependencies, all the things that are connected between the assets that are living inside of this project, like the models that we have over here and the code that we have over here and the mannequin that's living inside of the character and all that stuff. So what I'm going to do is collapse all of these folders right here. Everything under the game folder, not the game folder, don't collapse that one, but all the other ones, the ones that we see in the content browser, and uncheck all of them except for the top two. I'm going to leave the assets and the buildings folder to be migrated. So then I will click OK and locate your new project. So I've located mine already, and all I got to do is just hit select folder. And it's going to tell you that the content migration completed successfully. If it doesn't, if it asks you to overwrite something, don't overwrite it. Make sure if it does, go ahead, back up your project just in case if something goes wrong. But not the building system one. This one is going to be fine. We don't do any changes to this one, but the new project that you're going to move this to, it's always good to have backups. So go ahead and back it up and then go check what it is that it's trying to overwrite, because it's going to tell you that in the middle of the screen. But if you don't have those folders and the same exact naming for the assets, it's going to be just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and close the building system, and let's try to fix some issues, because we're going to have a bunch of those. Shouldn't be too difficult to fix, but we'll see. So let's open up our build component, which is the most important component in here. Let's hit compile this, and so I did some experimenting with this, and unfortunately I don't get as many errors as you will, because I got a lot of errors. Now the first one is going to be regarding the biggest one that's going to take the biggest chunk is going to be the one regarding the buildables variable right here. So the structure didn't seem to move over as good as we wanted it to. It didn't recognize it, so we got to do some tiny adjustments to make sure it runs. So probably on begin play over here under the variable, it's going to tell you that it's an error. It's not going to be blue, and also you will not have this variable inside of your variables list. Unfortunately, I already fixed that. Seems to work just fine, even though I deleted everything and I'm doing this again. But yeah, it is what it is. So what you want to do is go ahead, open up your buildable structure. And what I simply did was I added a new variable just to make a change to the structure. I saved it, I deleted that new variable, and I resaved it again. Maybe I have clicked save all as well. I'm not quite sure. I clicked save a bunch of times basically. That's what I did. And then once you recompile it, boom, this thing should be back to normal. Now once that is done, you will have another error that I don't have, which is going to be at the very bottom. So your top part should look exactly like I do, but you should have another error like the fifth one, which is going to happen in the spawn build on the set build cost. Let's fix that first. Let's ignore these things right here, because those are dependencies from dependencies. Well, they live inside of our third-person character, and we're gonna get to that in a second. First, let's fix the set build cost. Now that issue is happening inside of the buildables. So go ahead, open up your build master, and mine already is fine, but yours will have this error over here. It's going to give you an error from the set build cost. So what I simply did was I clicked file, refresh all nodes, and boom, everything is perfect. And instantly it's going to get fixed in here as well. Now, if you did not enable your Apex Destruction plugin, this part can give you errors as well. It's not going to recognize what kind of a component you are adding, because that is a that is a plugin. Destruction mesh system is a separate plugin, so it's not there by default. So make sure you did enable it, otherwise this will give you an error and you will have to enable the plugin. And well, hopefully it works with refresh nodes, but I'm not quite sure. It might actually break, so who knows. But since I have that enabled, everything seems to be fine in this department. So let's, just to be safe, go ahead, open up all of your buildables to check maybe if some other ones have errors as well. And now we should be on the same page, because that was the only error that I actually fixed. So as you can see, everything seems to be pretty good on my end. Build window seems to be functioning good as well. I guess the build cost fixed itself basically. There we go. So this seems to be just good. Now let's have a look next. We have these problems right here with the destroy component. Those are from the third person character. So I actually closed the other project. That's not what I was supposed to do. So go ahead and in the meantime, while we are looking for the other issues, go ahead, open up the building system, because we do need the character. I totally forgot about that. We're gonna need to migrate some of the things from the character to our new character. Now, but real quick, let's run through some other stuff like buildables database. Make sure, just to double check, make sure everything is good over here, which I know it is not, because as you can see by the trace channel, it says that it's looking for trace type query 4, 5, 6, 7, and because our trace channels do not exist. The channels that we used in the other project were custom made, and they will not exist in this one. So go ahead and go to your project settings, and then we want to go to the collisions, and we want to create those channels that we had. So I believe we had the foundation trace, should be blocked by default. Then we had the floor trace, we had the wall trace, we have the window trace, and then I believe we have the door trace. And I believe we only had 5. So once we have done that, we can go back to our buildables database and reset these. So actually it looks like, let's see, let's try to close this off, because it looks like it did add them automatically. Yeah, there we go. So just make sure they are correct. Maybe the order in which you type them in is wrong, like I have over here. So these two are wrong. So this is the door. It should be using the door trace, and this one should be using the window trace instead. So just go through all of those and make sure that they are using the correct trace channels. Now, once you have done that, what we need to do is fix up our collision boxes. So in every single one of our child buildables now, we will have some issues with the collision rules. So let's go back to this part right here. So this probably, some of you might have made mistakes again with the locations. That's totally fine. Happens a lot, but just make sure that your locations are correct. Do not change the scaling on any of that stuff. Use the box extent to expand the box sizes, because the box size and the visual that you see over here does not actually represent where the model is gonna stand. Now, I already put a lot of emphasis on that, but in this video we need something different. So select first foundation, hold shift, select the last foundation, and we got to make sure that we are blocking the correct trace channels. So what I'm going to do is ignore all the trace channels except for the foundation one. So we're going to do that. It's interesting that it's called foundation one. Oh, it's called foundation trace. Yeah, it just hid perfectly. Okay, so we have foundation trace. Then we're going to select first wall, hold shift, select the last wall, ignore all except for the wall trace channel. And then we have the second floor, which is again, ignore all except for the floor trace channel, because that is the second floor's floor essentially. Well, or first floor, depends where are you living in the world and how exactly you call that. So we have that done. Let's go to the next one, which is this one. So we have these 4 boxes for the flooring. So again, collisions, ignore everything and block the floor trace. We have the walls, which again, ignore everything except for the wall trace. And then we have the second foundation, which is again, ignore everything except for the floor trace. Here we go. So we're having some progress. Doors doesn't have any. That's good. Saves us some time. Windows don't have any. Excellent. Last one, build wall, which has some. So we're gonna select the floors first. Ignore and block the floor trace. For the window, again, ignore all, block window trace. And for the door, ignore everything and block the door trace. There we go. So that's that. Should be good. Let's see. What are the other things that we might want to see? Just go ahead, open up all the things. So this one should be fine by default. There isn't anything unique about that. We went through all the buildables, went through the database. UI HUD. Now this might have a couple of issues, but we're going to fix those in a second because we're going to delete this HUD entirely. Well, at least I am, because I have another HUD in this project right here that I'm already using. So now we need to go ahead and add the functionality inside of our third person character. So go ahead, open that one. So as you can see, I have mine over here. I have a bunch of things from the live streams. So what I'm going to do is add this code on the side over here. So also what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop open the building system one. I'm going to open up the character. And before we do anything, let's go ahead and let's add all the necessary components and the variables that we have inside of this project. Or maybe not the variables, but well, at least the components. So we have the build component inside of our character. So we got to make sure that in our new project, we also go ahead and add that one. So we add a build component. Good. The next thing, back in the building system project, I'm going to go ahead and copy all of this functionality that I have over here. So I'm going to copy all of this, Control C, and I'm going to go to the new project and I'm going to paste that in. So it's going to ask some of these things. I'm just going to confirm this. It's going to be all good. Here we go. Gave us a bunch of errors. Don't even worry about it. Now what we want to do is we want to recreate this trace function. So what you want to do is add a new function and let's call this trace. And then we want to copy all the content that we have in our building system. So we want to copy this code right here and bring it into our build inventory. Well, the new project, essentially, with the inventory. There we go. So we have this, we can compile this, and boom, we have a bunch of errors. A bunch of errors, as you can see. Don't even worry about it. Let's hit File, refresh all nodes, boom. Some of the errors are now gone, and the majority of them now are set values, like set progress value and set in progress. So let's click on the first one, set progress value. Here we have the in progress and progress value variables. So just right click those, create a variable, right click the other one, create another variable, compile this, boom, no more errors. Magic. As simple as that, because we have recreated everything that was necessary. Now, one thing though, so I have these overlapping events essentially. I have this on begin play and I have this on begin play. Well, it used to be a begin play. Now it's a custom event because I already have a begin play. So I'm going to grab the begin play content, which is this one, and I'm going to bring this to this event right here. Now, as you can see, there's only one thing that is different, which is the set camera node, which sets the player's camera reference inside of the build component. So I'm going to unplug it, remove those nodes, remove this custom event, and I'm going to go ahead and set it just like I had it in the other project. So that's going to get set inside of my build component, which is very necessary because that's what we're using to detect where to build. So that's good. Now the next things would be some of the key inputs. So what I'm gonna do is I have this thing right here, which is an event graph called needs action axis mapping, because in this project, again, I was lazy, did not create the action mapping that maybe I should have created. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to implement the keys in here. So let's have a look. In the event graph, again, what we have in common is the mouse left click. We have one over here, so I'm going to Control X those nodes into this need action because I have a left event over here as well. like so, and we are going to try to implement this inside of here. So what I'm gonna do is bring it back, delete the new one from the building one, and I'm gonna bring these nodes in like so. I'm gonna connect the execution, the pressed into the branch. True does this thing, but if it's false, we're gonna proceed with whatever we had previously, like so. So now I had some shooting mechanics over there. So now it is going to first check if the build mode is on, and then if it's not, then it's going to proceed with whatever code I had before. So that's going to look something like this. Not the prettiest way, but it's very simple. Obviously, if you have some kind of other branch checks, some other things that might happen, that might happen more often, then make sure that you maybe run this if branch check after. But if there isn't any if branch checks over here, then just go ahead and shove it in at the very beginning. So that's that. Let's have a look some more. What are the other things? We have the mouse wheel, Q, E, and one key events. So in the action mapping, we have E key event, which is the interaction one. That one we could replace, and I believe I have some debugging on keyboard key 1, so that's okay. Other than that, nothing really overlaps anything really, so that should be good. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and grab my E key event. I'm gonna move this over to the action mapping so I can combine this with this one. So as you can see over here, it's a very simple setup. That's a unused node. What I have here is a trace, which actually is a sphere trace, because this is a line trace, so we can't unfortunately reuse it. So what I'm gonna do over here is, inside of the event that we copied in, I'm gonna bring this back, and I'm going to check does implement an interface. And the interface we are looking for is the build interface, because this project did not have it before. It has its own interaction interface. So I'm going to go ahead and do an if branch check. Now it could be a little bit better to maybe combine the interfaces together to interact with the build with its own interface, but I'm not going to do that in this specific video. I might do that in the future ones, but in this one we're going to try to move this as quick as possible because it's already been a couple of minutes. So we're going to check if the whatever we hit with the trace has a build interface. If it's true, we're going to interact with the build. Now if that is false, we are going to go ahead and run the sphere trace that I have over here, which picks up an item for me. And I'm going to delete the old E key event. There we go. So that's that. I will probably have to come back and clean this up a little bit. But once we have done this, I think that is the only other key that I have overlapping. Now, if you have any other of those, go ahead and try to figure it out from what you saw me do with these events, with the left key and the E key. If you can't, then feel free to share some screenshots, share your ideas, like what it is that you are struggling with. Feel free to do that inside of my Discord. YouTube's comment section is not the greatest place for that because it takes a while to answer and share and all that stuff. So feel free to join my Discord and I'll try to help to you to best of my abilities. But with that being said, I think we are pretty much ready to go. Let's try to recompile our build component, and as you can see, now we can do that because we do have the event destroy component. So now we have an error. Makes sense, because our HUD does not have what it needs. Now let's have a look. Interestingly enough, I'm wondering which HUD it uses. So yeah, it uses this one. So I'm going to open it up. And also I'm going to open up the HUD that I had from the other project. So this one. So let's try to recreate this because this shouldn't be anything too difficult. So our new HUD needs an image. So we're going to plug that in inside of this thing. And let's see, let's try to keep the same settings I had. I was enjoying those quite a bit. So we had 100 by 100, and then we had probably -50, I would assume. And then we had the image, which was the material, which is progress material. So this one right here. and let's see what kind of bindings it has. So it has a visibility binding. So we're going to scroll down until we find the visibility, change that to collapsed, and create ourselves a binding. Now let's have a look what's inside of this binding right here. So we check whether the character is valid, all that stuff, grab its info, blah blah blah, set dynamic. So to make life easier, just go ahead and copy this whole thing. It's going to save you a lot of time. Delete this node, paste this guy in. Now we have a problem. This variable is non-existent. Instead, we have the player variable in this project. At least I have, as you can see. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and replace the reference. There we go. So this is my newly used character. And now it should be good to go. So we promoted these two variables inside of our character. So you should have those values. Just go ahead and change the player's reference. Now let's have a look what else we got. So in the event graph, I think that's pretty much it. Looks like that's actually it. So let's give it a test, hit play. There we go, seems to function. So we have our buildables, we can rotate through them. So that's going to be more difficult to build. There's no space for that. But other than that, as you can see, it does seem to function the way it should. We can interact, finish the build, should be able to move it around. There we go. And we can still destroy it just like we were able before. So that's going to be it for today's episode. We have migrated everything over. Seems to be functioning just fine. Like I said, if you're struggling with this, if you have any issues, make sure to join my Discord, share some screenshots with your errors and the code that you have around the vicinity of these errors, and we will try to help you. And yeah, that's going to be it, and see you in the next one, where we are going to start using resources and then eventually also replicating this whole thing.